Hey everyone, Winston here. In this video, I'm going to prove to you that you can get AI to write just like you do, or at least get pretty close. See, if you've ever used AI to help you write something, you run into a few problems. First, the hallucination problem. It just makes things up, things that are totally untrue. Second, the differentiation problem. It says the same things that everyone else is saying. It sounds just like any other podcast or webinar or article out there, whatever it is that you're writing. And third, and maybe most problematically, it just doesn't sound like you or any other human who's ever lived for that matter. And I'm not just talking about M dashes, the big tell for AI generated content. No, what I'm really talking about is that the AI writes like AI and you want it to write like you. So how do you get it to do that? Well, two big problems as always, and you have the power to fix these problems. A, you not using the right tools, and B, you're not using the tools correctly, i.e., you're not prompting the AI correctly. So today, I'm going to show you how to fix both of those problems, show you how to use AI to write like you do. Okay? So in today's assignment, we're going to take a big piece of content and repurpose it into three smaller pieces of content. Now, people in marketing do this, repurposing content thing all the time, right? We take content and adapt it for other channels or other formats. Let's say you host or attend or speak at an event, like an industry conference, and you want to, create a recap of the event on social. Well, that's repurposing content, right? Let's say you get in the news, you do a media interview, you're on TV, and you want to create a blurb to accompany the video in your newsroom, or you want to write an article based on what you said in the interview to kind of show off that you were on TV. That's repurposing content. Let's say you've already got a big library of content, maybe a bunch of stories that you've published in a particular month or a year. You want to create a list of the greatest hits of your insights, or a roundup of all the major announcements that you made in a certain period of time, right? That's repurposing. Um, or let's say you have, an evergreen piece of content, some distinct or proprietary framework, way of thinking, and you want to apply it to the latest, hot button issue or headline. That's all repurposing content, right? So think for a moment as we go through this video about, what this means for you if you've ever done any of these, or where you repurpose content. Because AI is really, really good at this kind of work, and that's what we're going to use it for today. Now, in today's case, we're going to have a big annual report and we need to repurpose it. So let's say we work for Deloitte, just in our hypothetical example. Okay. Now, every year, Deloitte has a big annual report called Tech Trends, and this is going to be our big piece of content. You don't have to know a thing about Tech Trends. Just know that it's a really large piece of content that they come out with every single year, the December before. So Tech Trends 2023, this 84-page report that you're looking at came out in December 22. Tech Trends 2024, published in 2023 in December, et cetera. And based on this report, like any good content marketing shop, Deloitte spins off, different pieces of content. They have owned content, earned content. I'd imagine that there's some budget for paid media. That includes, for instance, press releases. So here's the press release that came out for the 2023 report. Here's Tech Trends 2024. Deloitte also has a podcast called Tech Talks, and our 2024 Tech Trends report uh, had a podcast episode created off of it. Okay, from the floor of CES, actually, the Consumer Electronics Show that takes place in Vegas every year. All right, and then we've got this blog. This is a YouTube version of that interview that took place at CES, and then we've got this blog called CXO and Board, and most of the content comes from one of our partners, Jensen, as you can see here. And last year for the 2024 report, we adapted it for the Chief Operating Officer audience. Okay, Tech Trends 2024, a CEO's guide. So here's our assignment this year. We've got Tech Trends 2025, and we're going to take it and create those same three pieces of content. We're going to create a press release, a Tech Talks podcast script, also broadcast from CES, and a CXO and board blog post targeted at COOs. Okay, so we're going to create the press release, podcast script, and a blog post. Now, quick note as an aside, obviously the press release already exists. Deloitte published, a press release for the 2025 report, and they also actually did the same exact thing, just with a different spokesperson with the podcast. So you have the same thing for the 2025 report here. What'll be interesting then is that we're going to be able to compare our final output from our AI models to what Deloitte actually put out and see how close we got to the right answer. Okay. There is no blog post on the CXO and board this year for this year's report for 2025. So if anyone from Deloitte's watching this, just consider this some pro bono work. And that'll be interesting because we can use our imagination to see if we like the output kind of in a vacuum. Okay. All right. Three steps to this process, and it's really like a cycle. Okay. First, you create a style guide, and that style guide has your editorial standards built into it. Second, using the style guide, you direct the model to write the thing that you're writing. And then third, you use the output to improve the style guide. Okay, so that's why you kind of go in a cycle. And I'm using three tools in today's demo: Gemini, Claude, and OpenAI. And you're going to get to see each one in action for both creating style guides and creating the content based on style guides. Okay, so you're going to get to see Gemini 2.5 create the style guide for a press release, and then also create a blog post, and so forth with Claude 3.7 Sonnet and OpenAI's O3, the deep research agent that's built on O3. All right, let's get into it. So our first step is going to be creating the style guide. I actually really like Gemini for this. I use it the most for this particular part of the process because you're going to be uploading a lot of content when you ask a model to create a style guide, and Gemini offers you the largest context window relative to other models, so you're not going to get rate limited as quickly. Plus, Gemini 2.5 came out a few weeks ago, and I've really enjoyed playing around with it. I like the UI here. You can adjust the settings, for instance, temperature, how creative the model is in its output. But let's just go straight to dumping our prompt into this field. I'm not going to go through this line by line. It has all of the same elements that other good prompts have. We're priming it to take on a persona. We're telling it to create a style guide for writers who want to write press releases based on the Tech Trends report. We give it some context, and then we tell it using its internal tools and API calls to access all of these links. What we're really trying to do here is to show it how historically we've adapted the report to the press release. So 2024, here's how we did it. Here's the report in the press release, 2023, 2022, and 21. Let's run it and let it cook. Okay, so it's starting to spit out our style guide. All right, so we've got a fun little intro. Team, listen up. I've spent the better part of my career turning dense, high value content into news that resonates. Tech Trends report is prime material, and here's our style guide. Okay. So there's two things that you could do at this point to improve the style guide. The first is you could go line by line at this stage, and especially if you've been involved with this project before, i.e., you've taken the Tech Trends report and adapted it to press releases, you would know how to edit this at a line by line level. The second way to do it, and what we're really going to show in this video, is just copying and pasting this thing blindly and then testing it in the wild and comparing it to the output that you want. Okay. And then reverse engineering the edits that you should make here. And I really recommend a combo of both, right? So, of course, at this stage, we want to look at the style guide to see if there's anything that we can spot right away as far as improvements go. But most of the improvements to this style guide are going to come from just testing it and producing different outputs and then looking at those outputs to see where you should be improving the style guide. And that's why you're going to get better style guides as you go along, not just because you're getting better at prompting AI, but because your AI model is improving as you make it grow with you. In other words, at this point in my career, let's say, like you're not hiring Winston the writer. You're also hiring Winston the writer and his Gemini writer and his Claude writer and his OpenAI writer and all these other writers who develop over time as they and I get better together. So that's the idea here is you can improve the style guide as you go along and you test it and you create more outputs with it. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and I'll give you a quick overview of what's in here, and then we're going to copy and paste it over to Claude. Overarching philosophy, this is the strategy here. So it's identified that the press release is typically 600 to 800 words. I don't know if that's actually true for Deloitte as like a standard, but let's just use that range. And we've identified the specific audience, so C-suite executives, VPs, directors, and senior leaders. That's absolutely right for a consulting firm like Deloitte. What they care about, competitive advantage, what they don't have time, they're time poor, tone and voice, We're going to project confidence and expertise. We're forward looking, so the future implications of this trend of these trends, and then it gives us the structure, right? The formula for the press release. So Deloitte, the report name, and then the year and edition number. We lead with the overarching theme, standard PR date line. So in this case, New York, and then the date. We're using PR Newswire as our as the way that we're putting this out over the wire. So let's just keep doing that. And then we've got executive quotes. So, we may want to edit the style guide at this level if we know ahead of time who our spokespeople are going to be. Don't list all of the trends. Select 3 to 4. I don't know if that's right, but let's just go with 3 to 4 for now. Connecting narrative, call to action about Deloitte boilerplate. I might, I don't know how it would ensure that it's the most current version. I might just feed it the boilerplate if I'm working for the PR team. And then a media contact. I don't know if they actually include that, but it doesn't look like they typically do. So we might have to remove that. Okay. The art of distillation, language and word choice, non-negotiables. And sometimes what I've seen Gemini include in these is a final checklist, which I actually really appreciate. So right here, it would say before you send us your first draft, you need to make sure that you've done all of these things, X, Y, and Z. So in this particular case, the style guide didn't have that. We might prompt it to have a checklist because we're usually going to get better results that way. But this is a good start. Let's copy the markdown. Okay, so now we're in Claude, and you have a couple of options now when it comes to using the style guide that you got from Gemini in Claude. The first is you can just copy and paste it in, right? So here is our style guide, and we're just going to include it in the prompt. Or what makes Claude nice is you can actually create a style right here. You've got these presets, normal, concise, explanatory, and formal. But if you create a custom style, describe the style, and then use custom instructions, you can dump it here. So I've just taken the markdown prompt. I've taken the style guide and I've put it here. I'm going to hit create style. Come on. Okay. Deloitte, Tech Trends, PR, or press release writer. Okay. And it's already got a style summary. If we need to edit it, we can here. Let's close it. And then we can just select this moving forward. All right. So either one, let's just use this particular feature for now. So I'm going to give it that prompt. And then I'm dumping in the Tech Trends 2025 report, which is the same one that you saw over here. Okay. And then as soon as it uploads, I'm going to hit send. And really, this is the point at which you should be starting your stopwatch, because if you've already got your style guide built and you've already got the prompt ready to go, this is really where you should be thinking the drafting is starting. Okay, so you're comparing how long this part of the process takes to how long it would take you to write a press release from scratch. Okay, all right. So you and I are looking at this output at the same time. Now, if I were a lot more familiar, if I actually worked for Deloitte, if I were a lot more familiar with how we do these, then I would know, what specific things to call out here. But it's pretty close, I think, in a lot of ways to what the actual press release they put out was. Okay. So if you look at this, we're going to have key takeaways right off the bat. We know that our style guide is going to have to be updated to include key takeaways. Okay. We have I wonder if this why this matters thing is something that they always include. They do. Okay, so we're going to have to always include why this matters. All right. We've got trends. So it picked up on the trends, spatial computing, what's next for AI, hardware's eating the world, etc. Key quotes. Do they always have it this way? Key quotes. Okay, so they always break out the key quote section. So the style guide needs some updating when it comes to how to outline the press release. And then the about Deloitte boilerplate. I'm not sure if this is right. We'll just have to make sure. It looks like they never include the media context. We'll have to get rid of that. I'm also seeing quotes from non-Deloitte executives, gray bar here, security technologies here. So we're going to have to fix that. I'm sure there are a lot of other things that we could fix if we knew, if we worked for Deloitte and we knew what to look for. But let's just go ahead and start with that particular list. All right. So let's pop over to Gemini. Okay. I had to move my face so that you could see what I put in here. So here are the improvements that we're going to ask for. Always have a bulleted list of key takeaways at the start of the press release, and then follow the key takeaways with why this matters, then get into the trends, then key quotes. For key quotes, always have Deloitte consulting executives, never quote anyone else, include full, long, standalone quotes from them. Always use this boilerplate. I just copied and pasted this, and then never have immediate contact at the end. Okay, so these are the improvements to the style guide that we're going to ask for, and then we're going to run that. Okay, so it's updating the style guide. And you'll see that it's reflected here in the structure. So key takeaways and why this matters immediately following the lead. Um, and then we've got executive quotes. Sources, quotes must be attributed to Deloitte consulting executives. Never quote anyone else. Here's the Deloitte boilerplate. Remove the media contact. So it shows us, it tracks the changes. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and copy this markdown, put it back into Claude, rerun it, and then let's see if we have any more luck. Okay, so here's what we've got. Deloitte's 16th annual Tech Trends report finds AI becoming as foundational as electricity, foundational to the modern enterprise. Um, we've got some key takeaways. That's what we wanted. We've got our 6 trends. Um, it's not calling out the key quote section, so I have to like be really specific in the style guide. And then the about Deloitte section uh, needs to be led by about Deloitte. And then I would also probably want to include these 2 notes, but you get the idea, right? You can keep improving the style guide, and if you're improving it at that level, then you can just copy and paste it every single time you need to do this particular project. So it's just going to get easier and easier as you go along. Okay, let's go ahead and do the same thing, but for the podcast, and we're going to stay in Claude. Get rid of this. I'm going to turn on extended thinking. Okay. Same idea. You're a podcast producer with 30 years of experience. We're creating a style guide for writers who want to write scripts for the podcast. Here's the podcast link. Think insanely deeply about what defines the podcast's style, structure, and tone, and then create a style guide. Okay. So this is what it's spitting out. Deloitte's Tech Savvy Tech Talks podcast style guide. And we've got a similar thing to what we saw in Gemini for the press releases. We've got an overview, target audience, um, tone and voice, episode structure. It's broken it down by seconds and minutes. Interview approach. So the question types to include question format guidelines, sample question structures, language and terminology, do's and don'ts, guest interaction guidelines, branding elements, script formatting requirements. I don't know how important this stuff is. And 20 to 30, 25 to 30 minutes of final content. Um, Sample section template approval process. Okay, so it's made this part up. Um, I, yeah, someone at Deloitte tell me if this is all right. Okay, so we're going to copy this, pop over to OpenAI. We're using ChatGPT 4.5. I know I said earlier we're going to use O3, but I changed my mind. So we are going to dump in the style guide here. That's going to be our kind of context dump at the bottom of the prompt. And then I've got a prompt here. So you've been a Deloitte writer for over 30 years. Script a Tech Talks podcast episode based on the 2025 Tech Trends report. Let me turn on search so that I can get this link. Take your role extremely seriously, CES. we've already selected the interviewee. It's Mike, Chief Futurist at Deloitte Consulting. Um, we don't need this part. Study previous public appearances that he's made to understand his style, and then also study how we've adapted the 2024 version featuring someone else to a podcast episode. So I give it the podcast episode. That's the YouTube link that you saw earlier over here. And then I give it the 2024 report, right? I got to add that in. Hold on. This is just because the podcast episode from the 2025 Tech Trends report actually exists. So I'm trying to make sure that ChatGPT does not access that. Okay, and then we've got a style guide here. All right, so let's see what this turns out. Okay, so you can see that it's already started to write the script. It's going on. We've got the first segment, the intro, technology context, business implications. So it's, drafting these questions for Raquel and Mike's answers, and covering the key themes that ChatGPT picked up on. All right, actionable takeaways. Perfect. So we would do a similar thing here. We would compare this to the final transcript. This is what they actually did, what Raquel and Mike actually did from the CES floor for the 2025 Tech Trends report. That's the actual transcript. So we might compare these and then improve the style guide if we're working at Deloitte, and then kind of iterate accordingly. All right. But you kind of get the idea. Let's just do one more um, exercise where we're adapting the tech trends report to a blog post for COOs. Okay. So, okay, so I'm going to go to a new chat. I'm going to stick with ChatGPT 4.5 here. All right. You've seen this before. I'm giving it the context here, the blog. This is how we adapted last year's report. Here's the report. Create the style guide. Okay. Okay. So it's given us the style guide for writing blog posts based on the Tech Trends report. Audience profiles, COOs of medium to large enterprises, tone and voice, structure and formatting, content guidelines, visual elements, review and approval, resources. Okay. So a lot more bare bones than other style guides that we've seen from both Gemini and from Claude. You be the judge of which one, well, it kind of depends on which ones you have access to anyway. So then we're going to copy this and let's go to Gemini to see how good it is at drafting content. Okay, so here's the prompt. You've been a Deloitte writer for over 30 years, script a blog post based on the report, take it extremely seriously. Here's the style guide that we just got from OpenAI, dumped it in, and let's run it. Okay, so here's what it spit out. And what's nice is that it highlights three trends, which kind of is similar to last year's. Here's my outline for how you can move from awareness to action. So we've got something similar here, the path forward. Um, or I mean, in this case, it's also integrated action steps into each section. And then we've got a call to action right here. We link to the report. So we're gonna link here to the 2025 report and get them to read it. Okay. So we would, do the same thing here, go back to the style guide, keep improving it to make sure that it's in Jensen's voice, that it works for our style. But you kind of get the idea of this whole process. All right, hope that was helpful. Basically, the point is you should never draft anything from scratch ever again. You should also be getting better at using AI, and the AI should be better at taking your instructions and giving you first versions of whatever content you're producing as time goes on. And you should be quickly adapting your content to every channel and format without time being a constraint, without resources or bandwidth being a constraint, because you have AI at your disposal. All right, so let me know if you have any questions. Happy to chat about any of this. Have fun.